The GPS kept losing signal somewhere past Palatka, which was about right for how the whole week had gone. I had my phone wedged in the vent mount with 3% battery and no charging cable because I'd left mine plugged into the wall at the apartment. The apartment I probably wouldn't have by the end of the month if this house-sitting gig didn't come through. 5 nights, $400, cash on the last morning. That was the deal, and it was the only thing keeping my car insurance from lapsing and my landlord from changing the locks. I had maybe $32 in my account. Enough for gas to get there, not enough for much else. The warehouse job had cut my shifts 3 weeks back. Just like that. No warning, just a text saying they were adjusting schedules and I'd gone from 4 days a week to 1, maybe 2 if someone called out. I picked up a weekend at a different site unloading furniture, but that dried up fast. Then my roommate decided he was moving in with his girlfriend and bailed halfway through October, stuck me with his half of November rent on top of mine. I tried the gig apps. All of them. DoorDash had a 2-week wait list for new drivers in my zone. Uber wanted a vehicle inspection I couldn't afford. TaskRabbit got me one job moving boxes for $18 and the guy didn't tip. That was it. So when I saw the house-sitting post on some Facebook group I'd joined back when I thought I might flip thrift store furniture, I messaged within 5 minutes. The listing was bare. Just, need responsible sitter for small historic property in St. Augustine. 5 nights starting November 14th. 400 cash. Must follow house rules. Contact Leah Matthews. I sent her my number. She called 20 minutes later and asked if I could start that evening. Didn't ask for references. Didn't ask for my last name. Just confirmed I had transportation and could be there by 6. I said yes before she finished talking. Probably should have asked more questions. That's me, though. Desperate and not great at seeing red flags until I'm already standing in the middle of them. The drive took a little over 2 hours. The sun was getting low by the time I hit St. Augustine, all orange and hazy through the trees. I didn't know the city that well. I'd been once on a school trip in 8th grade, saw the old fort and some wax museum. It looked different now. Older, I guess. Or maybe I was just tired. Avel Street was narrow, brick-lined, tucked in close to the tourist part of town, but far enough off that it felt quieter. The GPS dropped me at the corner, and I spotted the house halfway down the block. Small. Pale stucco with a clay tile roof and black iron bars over the front windows. A wooden gate blocked the entrance, the kind with a heavy latch and decorative curls along the top. Leah Matthews was already there, standing next to a silver Honda with the engine still running. She looked exactly how she'd sounded on the phone. 60-something, short silver blonde hair, smart black slacks and a cardigan, even though it was still 70 degrees. She checked her watch when I pulled up. Silas? Yeah. I got out and locked the car. My sneakers were scuffed to hell, and my hoodie had a stain on the sleeve I'd stopped trying to scrub out. I figured she noticed. Good. Let's get you oriented quickly. She didn't smile. Just turned and unlocked the gate with a key from a ring she kept clipped to her purse. I have an appointment at 7, so we'll need to move. I followed her into a small courtyard. Terracotta pavers, a couple of potted plants that looked fake but probably weren't, an iron bench that had rust along the legs. The house wrapped around it in an L shape, all stucco and dark wood trim. The front door was painted deep green and had one of those old brass knockers shaped sort of like a lion. She moved fast, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and started talking before I'd even cleared the threshold. Alarm code is 3179. You'll need to enter it within 30 seconds of opening any exterior door. Don't forget, or the monitoring company calls, and they're difficult. She punched it into a beige keypad just inside the entry. It beeped twice and a little green light came on. Wi-Fi password is on the counter. Kitchen's through there, bathrooms off the hall, bedroom upstairs. Linens are clean. I nodded, trying to keep up. The inside of the house was dim and smelled faintly like lemon polish and something else I couldn't place. Old wood, maybe. The walls were white plaster, the floors were uneven terracotta tile, and every piece of furniture looked expensive in that understated way where nothing matches, but it all works. A clay bowl on the side table, a woven rug that was probably handmade, shelves with books that looked read but not beaten up. It felt staged. That was the word that came to mind, like someone had arranged it to look lived in but not actually messy. Leah walked me through the kitchen, which was tiny, and showed me the courtyard doors. They opened onto the same space I'd walked through, just from the other side. Then she stopped at the base of a narrow staircase and pointed to a door I almost hadn't noticed. It was low, maybe 5 feet tall, painted the same white as the walls but set weirdly into the space under the stairs, and the doorknob was higher than it should have been, like someone had installed it, without measuring. "This door stays closed," she said. I looked at it. "Okay. I mean it." Her voice got sharper. "It leads down to an old cistern. The house was built in the 1700s, and they used it for water storage. It's not safe. The steps are rotted and the space is flooded." "Got it. I won't open it." She didn't move, just kept looking at the door, then at me. "You might hear water moving down there, especially at night. The city's water table is high and the foundation's old. Don't let it bother you and don't open the door to check." That part bugged me a little. The way she said it, flat and firm, sort of like she expected I'd be tempted. I wasn't planning to open some random basement door. I didn't even like basements. "Sure," I said. "No problem." She studied me for a second, then reached into the canvas tote bag she'd been carrying and pulled out a folded paper grocery sack, the kind from Publix. She handed it to me, and I opened it enough to see what was inside. Oyster shells, just a bag of them. Cleaned off, but definitely oyster shells. "If you get anxious," she said, "sprinkle a few of these across the doorways. Front door, courtyard doors, the bottom of the stairs. It's an old tradition here. Some people find it calming." I stared at the bag. "Like, for luck?" "Something like that." I didn't know what to say to that. It sounded like superstition, the kind of thing someone's grandmother would insist on, but she said it so matter-of-fact that I just nodded and folded the bag closed. Wasn't worth arguing over. If she wanted me to scatter shells, I'd scatter shells. $400 was $400. "Okay," I said. She walked me back to the front door and handed me a single key on a plain metal ring. "Lock up every night. Don't let anyone in. If you have an emergency, my number's on the counter next to the Wi-Fi password." "Got it." She stepped out into the courtyard, and I followed her to the gate. She locked it behind her with a quick, practiced motion, tested the latch twice, then got into her Honda without saying goodbye. I watched her pull away. The street got quieter. No one else around. Just me and the house and a bag of oyster shells I didn't know what to do with. I went back inside and locked the front door. Punched in the alarm code. The beep felt loud in the empty hall. The house was silent. Not peaceful. Just quiet in a way that made me notice small things. The hum of the fridge in the kitchen. The faint creak of the floorboards when I shifted my weight. The way the light coming through the barred windows made shadows that didn't quite line up with the furniture. I dropped my backpack on the couch and looked around. 5 nights. That was all I had to do. Keep the place standing, don't open the weird door, maybe sprinkle some shells if I felt like it. Easy job. I kept telling myself that. I was on the couch around 11:30, scrolling on my phone with the brightness turned down to save battery, when the courtyard light clicked on. Didn't touch the switch. Wasn't even near it. The switch was in the kitchen. One of those old toggle things mounted next to the doorframe. I'd noticed it earlier when Leah showed me around, but I hadn't flipped it. The courtyard had enough ambient light from the street that I could see the outline of the fountain and the potted plants without turning anything on. Now the whole space was lit up, bright white light from a fixture mounted above the back door, the kind that probably had a motion sensor even though Leah hadn't mentioned one. I sat up, put my phone down on the couch cushion. Probably just a cat or something. A raccoon. St. Augustine had to have raccoons, right? Old city, lots of garbage, tourists leaving food everywhere. Made sense. I stayed on the couch for maybe 30 seconds, telling myself it was nothing. Then I got up and walked into the kitchen because I'm not great at leaving things alone. The window over the sink looked straight out into the courtyard. I stood there with my hands on the counter, leaning forward a little to get a better angle. That's when I saw the figure by the fountain. Head down. Hair hanging forward, long enough that I couldn't see the face. Shoulders hunched, clothes dark and wet, water dripping off them onto the terracotta pavers. They were just standing there, not moving, not looking around. It looked like they'd climbed out of the fountain itself, which didn't make sense because the fountain was maybe 2 feet across and barely deep enough to hold a few inches of water. My stomach did that thing where it drops and tightens at the same time. I didn't move for a second, just watched. The figure stayed completely still. Water pooled around their feet. Their shoulders rose and fell a little, like they were breathing hard or trying to catch their breath. Okay, so, someone was in the courtyard. Someone who shouldn't be there. Someone who was either messing with me or genuinely didn't know this was private property. I figured scaring them off was the smart move. I banged on the glass with the flat of my hand. 3 solid hits, loud enough that the window rattled in the frame. "Hey!" The figure didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't look up, didn't move at all. I hit the glass again, harder this time. Nothing. That part bugged me a little. I stepped back from the window and went to the back door. The one Leah had shown me earlier. The one that opened onto the courtyard from the kitchen side. There was a chain latch near the top of the door frame, the kind you see on cheap apartment doors. I made sure it was in place before I unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door open about 4 inches. Cold air hit my face. Smelled like wet brick and something else. Salt, maybe. Seawater. "Hey," I said again, louder this time. "This is private property. You need to leave." The figure's head stayed down, hair still hanging forward, but their mouth moved. I couldn't hear what they were saying. It looked like whispering, or counting. Their lips kept moving in this repetitive rhythm, same pattern over and over. "I'm calling the police," I said. Tried to make my voice firm, confident. The kind of voice that makes people think you're serious and not just some guy who's broken desperate enough to take a sketchy house-sitting job from a stranger. The courtyard light snapped off. Just like that. No warning. The whole space went dark. I froze with my hand on the door. Then the light snapped back on. The courtyard was empty. I pushed the door open a little wider, still keeping the chain latched, and leaned out as far as I could. Scanned the whole space. The fountain sat exactly where it had been before. No water on the pavers, no wet footprints. No sign anyone had been standing there at all. The potted plants hadn't moved. The iron bench looked the same. Everything was still and quiet and completely undisturbed. I pulled back inside and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking a little. Not a lot. Just enough that it took me 2 tries to get the lock to catch. I walked through the downstairs and flipped on every light I could find. The one in the entryway, the lamp next to the couch, the overhead fixture in the bathroom, the small reading light mounted on the wall near the stairs. The house lit up room by room, and I felt a little better with each switch. I checked the front door, still locked, deadbolt in place, alarm system showing a green light on the keypad. I checked the courtyard door again, locked, chain latched. I went back to the kitchen window and looked out one more time. The courtyard was empty. The fountain had maybe an inch of water sitting in the bottom basin, same as before. No ripples, no movement. Nothing was forced. Nothing was missing. I walked back toward the living room, and that's when I noticed the door under the stairs. It was open. Not wide, just cracked, maybe a finger's width. I stopped in the middle of the hallway and stared at it. Leah had told me to keep it closed, told me it led to an old cistern with rotted steps and flooded space below. Told me not to open it. I hadn't opened it. I'd been on the couch the whole time until the courtyard light came on. Hadn't gone near the stairs, hadn't touched the door. I walked over and crouched down in front of it. The doorknob was higher than normal, right around chest height when I was standing. From this angle, I could see a thin line of darkness where the door had pulled away from the frame. Cold air leaked out. I could feel it on my face. Damp and briny, the same smell I'd caught when I opened the courtyard door. Salt and wet stone and something older, something that made my throat tighten. I reached out and pushed the door shut. It moved easily, no resistance, and clicked into place with a soft sound that seemed too loud in the quiet house. The cold air stopped. I stayed crouched there for another few seconds, hand still on the doorknob, waiting to see if it would drift open again. It didn't. I stood up and pulled my phone out of my pocket, found Leah's number in my recent calls, and opened a new text. Hey. The door under the stairs was open. I closed it. Just FYI. I hit send and walked back to the couch. My phone buzzed maybe 10 seconds later. I looked down at the screen. Leah Matthews. Do not open that door. Under any circumstances. I was very clear about this. I read it twice. She'd replied so fast, like she'd been waiting. Like she'd been sitting there with her phone in her hand, expecting me to text about exactly this. I typed back. I didn't open it. It was already open when I noticed it. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Then her response. Leah Matthews. It should remain closed at all times. If it opens again, close it and do not look inside. Do you understand? I sat there staring at my phone. Yeah, I understood. I just didn't know what the hell I'd agreed to. I tried sleeping on the couch with my phone in my hand. Kept the screen unlocked because I figured if something happened, I didn't want to waste time with the passcode. Battery was down to 11% by then. All the downstairs lights were still on, which made the whole room feel flat and exposed. I could see the coffee table, the blank TV screen reflecting the lamp, the corner of the kitchen doorway. Everything visible. That was supposed to help. I closed my eyes around one something and kept telling myself this was an easy $400. Just stay put. Don't overthink it. Old houses make noise. Courtyard lights turn on by themselves all the time. Motion sensors, bad wiring, whatever. The door under the stairs probably just didn't latch right the first time. I almost believed it. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to dripping. Not the slow background kind you tune out. This sounded way too close, like drops landing on wood right next to my head. I opened my eyes and didn't move, just listened. The sound was steady, soft but deliberate, coming from maybe 3 feet away. I turned my head and looked at the coffee table. Wet fingerprints on the wood, long and thin like someone had pulled themselves up from the floor. I stared at them for probably 5 full seconds, trying to make them into something else. Watering from a glass I forgot about, smudge from when I put my backpack down earlier. Anything normal. But they were too clear. 4 fingers and a thumb, elongated, with the grain of the wood showing darker where the water sat. Another print appeared while I watched. Just formed. Wet outline pressing into existence next to the first one, droplets beating at the edges. Then another, building a slow trail toward the hallway. I jolted up and my knee hit the coffee table hard enough to knock over the lamp on the side table. It crashed onto the floor and the bulb popped with a sharp little crack. I didn't even look at it. The new print stopped forming, just stopped, mid-trail like someone had paused. But the old ones stayed glossy, slick and wet, catching the overhead light. They didn't evaporate, didn't fade. They looked almost oily. I stood there breathing too fast with my phone still in my hand, staring at the trail leading from the coffee table toward the hall where the stairs were, where the door under the stairs was. My brain did that thing where it tries to fix the situation. Maybe a leak in the ceiling. Maybe condensation dripping from somewhere. Maybe I was still asleep. But I wasn't asleep, and there was no leak, and the prints had knuckles. I looked at the Publix bag on the floor next to the couch where I'd left it after Leah handed it to me. The oyster shells. She'd said to sprinkle them across doorways if I got anxious. Old local tradition. Some people find it calming. I grabbed the bag. Didn't even think about it. Just picked it up and walked straight to the back door in the kitchen, the one that opened to the courtyard. My hands were shaking a little, but I managed to open the bag without spilling it everywhere. The shells were rough and uneven, smelling faintly like bleach and something older underneath. I crouched down and started sprinkling a line across the threshold, right up against the base of the door where it met the tile. Felt stupid doing it. I'm not superstitious. Never have been. But I was treating it like a practical barrier anyway, like caulking a gap or putting a towel under a leak. Something you do because it's the only thing you can do. The shells clicked softly as they settled. I used maybe a third of the bag to make the line solid. No gaps. Then I stood up and waited. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. I sat at the kitchen table with the bag of shells in my lap and my phone face up next to my elbow, watching the courtyard door. The clock on the microwave ticked over to 2:47, then 2:53, then 3:09. The house settled around me with the usual creaks and hums. Refrigerator cycling on and off. Faint rustle of wind outside. Nothing weird. Nothing wrong. I almost convinced myself it was just plumbing. Old pipes. Water hammer. Maybe ground saturation from rain I didn't know about. The fingerprints were probably just condensation after all. And I'd panicked because it was the middle of the night in a strange house and I was already on edge from the thing in the courtyard earlier. That's what I told myself. Then the shells started clicking, one by one, like careful steps. I sat up straight and stared at the line I'd laid down. The shells weren't moving. I could see them clearly under the kitchen light, same rough crescent shapes I'd sprinkled an hour ago. But the sound was definitely coming from there. Tiny, distinct clicks, each one separated by maybe 2 seconds. Methodical. The back doorknob turned slightly. I watched it rotate maybe 15 degrees, then stop. Then it turned again. Slower this time. Testing. The chain was still latched near the top of the doorframe. I could see it from where I sat, taut and holding. The deadbolt was locked. But something was definitely trying the door, and whatever it was wasn't in a hurry. I should have looked away. Should have gone upstairs or into the bathroom or literally anywhere else. But I stayed frozen at the table watching the doorknob twist in tiny increments like someone was figuring out how it worked. Then something pressed against the glass. The door had a small window at the top, maybe 8 inches by 12, with old rippled glass that distorted whatever was on the other side. But I could see the shape. Rounded and smooth, bigger than a hand. It pressed flat against the pane from outside, and there was a single dark spot under the surface. It looked like an eye behind water. Not blinking, just there. Watching. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the keypad with my thumb shaking so bad I almost dropped it. Didn't dial 911. I wanted a record without making it a full-blown emergency. Wanted someone to know something was happening without having to explain wet fingerprints and oyster shells and a thing in the courtyard that climbed out of a fountain. I searched St. Johns County non-emergency, and the number came up first result. I tapped it, and the call started ringing before I could second-guess myself. The rounded shape stayed pressed against the glass. The doorknob stopped turning. The shells kept clicking one by one, soft and patient. And I sat there with the phone to my ear, waiting for someone to pick up. The non-emergency line transferred me twice before someone told me a deputy would swing by within the hour. I sat at that kitchen table with the phone on speaker, watching the back door until the shape at the window pulled away and the shells stopped clicking. Just stopped. All at once, around 3:45. I didn't move the shells, left them right there across the threshold. Jordan Barker showed up at 4:32 in the morning, which I guess technically counted as within the hour, but felt longer. I heard the car pull up outside and saw the lights sweep across the front window bars. One quick knock, then his voice through the door. "Sheriff's office." I got up and checked the peephole. Guy in uniform, patrol car behind him in the street with the engine still running. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened up. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired I was. Wired and shaky from watching wet fingerprints form on furniture. But the regular end-of-shift tired. Maybe 6 feet, solid build, close-cropped hair. Late 30s, I figured. He had a flashlight clipped to his belt and a notebook already in his hand. "You called about a disturbance," he said. Didn't ask my name. Didn't ask if I was okay. "Yeah," I said. "Someone was in the courtyard, out back." He nodded once, writing something down. "You see them leave?" "No, they just..." I stopped. Wasn't sure how to finish that sentence without sounding insane. They were there, then they weren't. Jordan looked up from his notebook. "Uh-huh. You the owner?" "House sitting," I said, "for Leah Matthews." Something shifted in his face when I said her name. Not much, just a quick flicker, then back to neutral. "Right. Okay. Mind if I take a look around back?" I stepped aside and let him in. He walked through like he'd been here before, didn't wait for me to show him the way. Went straight through the kitchen to the back door, then stopped when he saw the oyster shells. "That's new," he said. "Old tradition," I said. "For luck." He made a sound that might have been a laugh or just air through his nose. Then he unlocked the deadbolt. I'd locked it again after the shape left, and stepped out into the courtyard. I stayed in the doorway and watched him walk the space with his flashlight. He checked the fountain first, shining the beam down into the basin, crouched next to it and ran his hand along the rim. Checked the potted plants, the bench, walked the perimeter and tested the gate latch twice. "Nothing out here," he called back. "There was," I said. He came back inside and locked the door behind him, which I appreciated even if he did it on autopilot. "Look," he said, "old homes like this, they settle. Pipes expand and contract. You get leaks, you get sounds. It's normal." "I saw someone," I said. "Uh-huh." He wrote something else in his notebook. "And they were doing what, exactly?" "Standing by the fountain, dripping wet." "Dripping wet," he repeated. Flat voice, no infection. "Yeah." "In November." I didn't answer that. Jordan clicked his pen and tucked the notebook into his belt. "Here's my advice. Don't stare out windows at night. Your eyes play tricks. You see shadows, reflections, whatever. Your brain fills in the rest. Happens all the time." "Sure," I said. He looked at me for a second, then passed me toward the hallway. "Leah mention anything about the house when she hired you?" "Just the basics," I said. "Alarm code, don't let anyone in." "Right." He stepped further into the living room, and that's when I realized he was looking at the door under the stairs. "That the cistern access?" My stomach dropped a little. "Yeah." "Mind if I check it?" "Liability thing. If someone actually got in, could have gone down there." "It's locked," I said, which was a lie, but I said it anyway. "Uh-huh." Jordan walked toward the stairs, and I moved without thinking, putting myself between him and the door. He stopped, raised an eyebrow. "Problem?" "Leah said not to open it," I said. "Steps are rotted, flooded down there." "I'm aware," he said. "I'm just doing a sweep." "You already checked the courtyard," I said. "No one's here." We stood there for a few seconds. He had about 30 pounds on me and the uniform and probably a decent argument about obstruction or whatever. But I didn't move. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and stepped back. "Fine. Your call." He pulled the notebook out again and wrote something that took longer than it should have. When he finished, he looked up, and his expression had shifted, less tired, more irritated. "You know, people house sit here pretty regularly. Never had this many calls from one person in a single night." I hadn't made multiple calls, just the one. But I didn't correct him. "Leah's got a reputation to maintain," he continued. "Property like this, historical registry, tourism boards involved. Last thing she needs is someone making a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said. "Good." He tucked the notebook away again. "Keep it that way." He walked himself to the front door, and I followed, mostly to make sure he actually left. He paused on the threshold and glanced back at me one more time. "Get some sleep," he said. "You look like hell." Then he was gone. I locked the door and watched through the window bars as he got in his car, sat there for a minute writing more notes, then finally pulled away. I stood there until the taillights disappeared. The sun came up around 7. I'd been awake for something like 28 hours at that point, but I didn't feel like sleeping. Partly adrenaline, partly the fact that every time I closed my eyes, I saw wet fingerprints forming on wood grain. I left the shells where they were and went upstairs to shower. The bathroom was small, just a toilet and a narrow stall with old tile that had probably been white 60 years ago. Water pressure was decent. I stayed under the spray until the hot ran out, which took maybe 8 minutes. When I came back downstairs, the house looked normal. Morning light coming through the front windows. No wet prints, no cold air leaking from under the cistern door. The courtyard outside was empty, fountain bone dry except for the inch of standing water at the bottom. I thought about staying in. Figured I could sit on the couch, keep an eye on things, wait it out. But I needed food. Phone was at 4%, and I didn't have a charging cable that fit Leah's outlets. Wrong generation, wrong brand, whatever. And honestly, I needed to get out of the house for a couple hours before I started second-guessing what I'd actually seen. I grabbed my wallet and keys and headed out around 9. St. Augustine in daylight is a whole different thing. Tourists everywhere, families with strollers, couples taking photos in front of the old fort. I walked past a guy in a tricorn hat giving a ghost tour speech on a street corner, voice booming about Spanish settlers and British occupation and some lady who supposedly haunts the lighthouse. Felt surreal, all of it. Like I'd stepped out of one reality and into another. I found a Publix about 6 blocks west and bought the basics. Bread, peanut butter, couple cans of soup, bananas, a box of granola bars. Grabbed a charging cable off the impulse rack near the register. Total came to $23 and change, which left me with about $9 until Leah paid me. Cashier was maybe 19, blonde ponytail, name tag that said Becca. She smiled and asked if I was visiting. "Working," I said. "Cool. Whereabouts?" "Avils Street." Her smile faltered just a little. Then she handed me my receipt and the smile came back. Nice area, real historic. I took my bag and left. Walked back slower than I'd come, telling myself this was fine. Just a gig. 5 nights, 400 cash, no references required. People did this kind of thing all the time. House sitting wasn't complicated. You showed up, you kept the lights on, you didn't break anything. That was it. By the time I got back to the house, I'd almost convinced myself. That's when I saw the guy standing across from the gate. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing there on the opposite curb, hands in his pockets, watching the house. Older, maybe mid-40s. Sandy brown hair combed back, long face, wearing a driver's vest over a button-down and a brimmed cap. I slowed down. He saw me and smiled. "You're the new sitter," he said. Not a question. "Yeah," I said. He stepped off the curb and crossed toward me, hand extended. "Thomas Munoz. I drive one of the carriages downtown, do the evening historical route." I shook his hand because it felt weird not to. Silas. Good to meet you, Silas. He let go and stepped back, still smiling. I keep an eye on a few houses for the owners. This block especially. Leah asked me to check in, make sure you're settling okay. I hadn't heard Leah mention him. Didn't love that she'd told people I was here. But I just nodded. Doing fine. Good, good. Thomas glanced at the house, then back at me. Beautiful property. You know the history. Not really. 1700s, he said. Built right after the British took over from the Spanish. This whole area used to border an old hospital lot. Quarantine station, technically. Back when they had yellow fever outbreaks, cholera, that kind of thing. I shifted the grocery bag to my other hand. Didn't say anything. Cisterns were real common, Thomas continued. Stored water for the sick. Sometimes they used them for other things too when space ran out. He paused, watched my face. Leah mentioned the one under the stairs? Yeah, I said, told me not to open it. Thomas smiled wider. That's what she tells everyone. Okay. Funny thing though. He leaned back against the gatepost, casual. People who stay here alone, they always end up opening it. Even when they swear up and down they won't. Something about the house, I think. Gets in your head. I looked at him. He looked back, still smiling. I'm not opening it, I said. Sure. He pushed off the post and adjusted his cap. Well, listen. I'm around most evenings. Do the Sunset route, then I'm back here by 10 or so. I'll check in later. Make sure you're good. You don't have to do that. No trouble, he said. Leah likes to know her sitters are looked after. He gave me a little two-finger salute and walked off down the street, hands back in his pockets. I stood there with my groceries and watched him go. The warning was clear enough. Cisterns, outbreaks, people opening doors they shouldn't. Standard creepy local history stuff, probably recycled from his carriage tour script. But what stuck with me wasn't the content. It was how practiced he sounded. Like he'd given that exact speech before. Multiple times. Same pauses, same smile, same lean against the gatepost. Like he knew exactly what came next. That night, the house stopped pretending. I heard it around 9:30. I'd been sitting on the couch, charging my phone and eating a peanut butter sandwich when the sound started. Not dripping this time. Running water. Steady flow. I put the sandwich down on the coffee table and walked to the kitchen window. The courtyard fountain was on. Not trickling, actually running. Water poured from the top tier into the basin below in a solid stream that caught the outdoor light and made the whole courtyard look wet and alive. I stood there for probably 20 seconds just staring at it. There wasn't a switch for the fountain. Leah never mentioned one. I'd checked the courtyard twice today in daylight, and the fountain was dry except for that 1 inch of standing water at the bottom that never moved. Now it was running full blast. I unlocked the back door, left the chain latched, and cracked it open about 6 inches. Cold air hit my face again. Same salt smell, same wet brick. The water pouring into the basin wasn't clear. It was dark, brown maybe. Hard to tell under the yellow courtyard light, but it looked thick. Steeped, kind of. Like really strong tea someone left sitting too long. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing moved. Just the fountain running and that dark water filling the basin, which should have overflowed by now but wasn't. The level stayed exactly the same no matter how much poured in. I pulled the door shut, locked it, checked the deadbolt twice. Walked back to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch with my phone in my hand, trying to decide if this was worth another call. Jordan Barker made it pretty clear I wasn't supposed to bother anyone. And what was I going to say? The fountain turned on by itself and the water looks weird. That was when the door under the stairs thumped, one solid hit from the other side. I froze, phone still in my hand, sandwich on the table going stale. The thump came again, harder this time, like someone putting their whole shoulder into it. Not a settling sound, not pipes. Something hitting the door on purpose, testing it, seeing if it would give. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I made it to the hallway and stopped about 3 feet from the door. It looked normal. White paint. Brass knob positioned too high. No gap at the bottom this time. Completely flush with the frame. Another thump. The door shuddered in its frame but didn't open. I looked around. The kitchen chair was wood with a straight back, and it looked about the right height. I grabbed it, dragged it over, and wedged it under the doorknob at an angle. The chair leg scraped tile and the back rail caught right under the knob. Solid. Tight. I stepped back. For about 10 seconds I felt good. In control. Like I'd actually done something that mattered. Then the chair started moving. Not fast. Slow. Steady. The back legs dragged across the tile 1 inch at a time with this awful scraping sound, and the whole chair tilted forward like something on the other side was pulling it, patient and deliberate, until the back rail slipped free of the knob and the chair tipped over sideways and clattered onto the floor. The door stayed closed, but I could feel the pressure behind it. Something waiting. I pulled out my phone and called Leah. She picked up on the second ring. "Yes? I'm leaving," I said. My voice came out flat. No shaking. Just done. Pause on her end. Maybe 3 seconds. "All right," she said. That was it. No argument. No questions. "You understand you'll only be paid if you complete the assignment," she added. Same tone she used when she told me not to open the cistern door. Professional. Detached. "Yeah," I said. "I got it." Another pause. Longer this time. "Silas," she said, "have you looked into the fountain yet?" The question landed weird. Not like she was asking if I'd seen it running. Like she already knew I had, and she wanted to know if I'd done the next thing. "What?" I said. "The courtyard fountain," Leah said. "Have you looked into it?" I didn't answer right away. My brain was trying to catch up. She expected me to check the fountain, not avoid it, not call someone, check it. Like that was part of the job. "No," I said. A small sound, almost approving. "Well, the choice is yours." She hung up. I stood there holding my phone, staring at the chair on the floor and the door that hadn't opened but wanted to. Then I went upstairs and started packing. My backpack was still on the bed where I'd left it after my shower. I shoved in my hoodie, the charging cable, my wallet, the leftover granola bars from the Publix bag. Didn't fold anything. Just stuffed it all in and zipped it shut. Came back downstairs. The chair was still on its side. The door was still closed. The fountain was still running outside. I could hear it through the kitchen window, steady and wrong. I slung the backpack over one shoulder, walked to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled it open. The street was empty. Completely empty. No cars, no tourists, no lights in any of the other buildings. Except at the corner, maybe 30 feet to my left, there was a carriage. Thomas Munos's carriage. The same one I'd seen him standing next to this morning when I got back from Publix. Dark wood, big wheels, bench seat up top, no horse. Just the carriage sitting there by itself in the middle of the brick street, positioned so anyone leaving the house would see it first thing. I stood on the porch with my backpack and my keys and stared at it. Thomas said he ran the evening historical route. Said he finished around 10. It was 9:15. The carriage didn't move, didn't creak, just sat there. I took one step down onto the brick walkway. Behind me, the doorbell rang. I turned around. The front door was still open. I'd left it that way when I stepped out. The hallway inside was lit. The entryway light I'd turned on earlier still glowing yellow against the white walls. I walked back up the 2 steps and leaned toward the peephole. There was someone standing in the hallway, right there, maybe 2 feet from the door. Wet, silhouette only. No details. Just a dark shape with water dripping off it onto the tile, shoulders hunched forward, head down. Too close. way too close to the door. I could see the edges of the hallway behind it, the stairs, the toppled chair. But the figure was right there in the center of the frame, blocking most of my view, like it knew exactly where the peephole was and had positioned itself so I'd have to look at it. The house wanted my attention aimed inward. I stepped back from the door. My hand was still on the knob. The street was behind me, the carriage at the corner, the empty brick road. The wet shape inside didn't move. My phone buzzed in my hand. I was still standing on the porch with my backpack, the wet figure 2 feet inside through the peephole, the empty carriage at the corner. The screen showed Leah's name. If you leave now, Deputy Barker will need to file a report about the disturbance. I'd prefer not to involve him again tonight. I read it twice. Not a request, not a threat exactly. Just information delivered the same way she'd given me the alarm code and the oyster shells. Practical, neutral, already decided. I looked back at the street. The carriage sat exactly where it had been. No horse, no Thomas. Just the thing itself positioned so I couldn't miss it. Jordan had known which house this was the second I said Leah's name. He'd walked straight to the kitchen without asking directions. He'd gone directly to the courtyard door and checked the fountain like he'd done it before, and he'd mentioned previous sitters, plural, who'd made calls. Thomas had said people always opened the cistern. He'd said it with that rehearsed smile, standing exactly where anyone leaving would see him first. He'd told me Leah liked her sitters looked after. I stood there with my phone and my backpack and the wet shape inside waiting 2 feet from the door. The police response hadn't been protection. The familiar faces nearby weren't coincidence. They were there to keep me inside until I broke the rule. I stepped back through the doorway and closed the front door behind me. The deadbolt clicked. I turned around. The hallway was empty. No wet figure, no dripping. Just the toppled chair on the floor and the door under the stairs with its too-high knob and white paint. I dropped my backpack on the couch and walked to the kitchen. The fountain was still running outside. I could hear it through the window, that steady pour of thick brown water that never filled the basin past the same level. I opened the drawer next to the sink and pulled out the container of table salt. Morton, the blue cylinder with the girl and umbrella. I shook it. Half full, probably. I walked back to the hallway and crouched in front of the door under the stairs. My hand was steady when I reached for the knob. That surprised me a little. I'd expected shaking or hesitation or some kind of physical resistance, but my fingers just closed around the brass and turned. Cold air poured out immediately. Not a draft. A flood of it, damp and thick, smelling like salt and wet stone, and something older underneath that made my throat tighten, the same way it had the first time. The door swung inward on its own once I released the knob, opening all the way until it hit the interior wall with a soft thump. Steps led down. Brick, narrow, steep. Maybe 12 of them before they disappeared into darkness. I could see standing water at the bottom, black and smooth, reflecting nothing. The surface moved without any visible source. Not ripples, just slow rolls, like something large had turned over underneath and the motion was still working its way up. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut down into the space and I saw the far wall. Oyster shells were set into the mortar in a rough ring, maybe 3 feet across. The shells were old, gray-white, edges worn smooth, packed tight into the brick with their ridged backs facing out. The pattern matched the bag Leah had given me exactly. Same size shells, same arrangement. Like someone had taken a handful and pressed them into wet mortar one by one, sealing something in or keeping something out. The water moved again. Closer this time. I heard it before I saw it. A wet sliding sound, then a voice. Spanish. Close. Insistent. The words ran together too fast for me to separate them, but the tone was clear. It wanted acknowledgement. It wanted me to look down, to meet its eyes, to see it fully so it could see me. I kept my gaze on the shell ring. My hand tightened on the salt container. The voice kept going, rising slightly. And I caught one word I recognized. Mira. Look. I didn't. I twisted the metal spout on the salt container and poured a thick line along the bottom edge of the shell ring, left to right, slow and deliberate. The salt hissed when it hit the wet brick. I kept pouring, completing the circle, sealing the boundary the way you'd close a gap in a fence. The water surged. I saw it in my peripheral vision. A fast upward rush, black and thick, climbing the steps 3 at a time. Pale shapes slid under the surface, long and smooth, turning like they were searching, not swimming, turning, deliberate, looking for my face. I backed up without looking down. My heel hit the hallway tile. I grabbed the door with my free hand and slammed it shut. The house shuddered. Not the door. The whole structure, the walls, the floor, the beams overhead. Everything flexed inward for half a second like the building had taken a breath. Then I heard the footsteps. Wet, fast, slapping tile. Coming from the kitchen, from the courtyard door, moving toward me with that same deliberate rhythm I'd heard on the stairs the night before. I froze with my back against the opposite wall, salt container still in my hand. The footsteps reached the hallway. I could see the tile getting darker where they landed, wet prints forming one after another, coming straight at me. They stopped at the oyster shell line I'd laid across the threshold earlier. The pressure in the air eased, not gone, just pulled back, like something testing the boundary and finding it solid. The footsteps retreated, slow, unhurried, back toward the kitchen, back toward the courtyard, fading into the sound of the fountain still running outside. The dripping stopped. I stayed against the wall with the salt in my hand and my phone flashlight still on, pointing at nothing. My heart was doing something uneven in my chest. I counted to 60. Then I counted again. Nothing moved. The door under the stairs stayed closed. The air warmed up by maybe 2 degrees. I walked to the kitchen and looked out the window. The courtyard was dry. The fountain sat in the center with about an inch of standing water at the bottom, completely still. I went back to the couch, sat down, and didn't move until the sky started getting lighter. Morning came with a deliberate-looking neatness. The chain on the back door was latched. I checked it twice, and it was secure, positioned exactly the way I'd left it the night before, maybe even straighter. The chair I'd wedged under the cistern doorknob was back in the kitchen, pushed up to the table at a perfect 90-degree angle like someone had placed it with a ruler. The oyster shell line across the threshold was gone, swept clean, not scattered, just gone. And the Publix bag sitting on the counter next to my phone was full again. I opened it and looked inside. Cleaned oyster shells. Same number as when Leah had handed it to me on the first night. Same faint bleach smell. I stood there holding the bag for probably 30 seconds. Then I set it back down and walked away. My phone buzzed at 7:43. Leah's text was short, professional. Cash is in the kitchen drawer next to the sink. You can leave the key inside on the counter. Lock the deadbolt on your way out. Thank you. I opened the drawer. $400 in 20s, folded once, held with a rubber band. I took the money. I left the key on the counter next to the Wi-Fi password she'd written on an index card. I grabbed my backpack, walked to the front door, entered the alarm code, and stepped outside. The street was normal. Tourists walking past with coffee cups. A guy unloading boxes from a truck 2 houses down. No carriage, no Thomas. I didn't call Jordan. I didn't go looking for Thomas to ask what the hell he'd been doing with that carriage at the corner. I just walked to my car, threw my backpack in the passenger seat, and drove back north on A1A with the window cracked and the radio off. I carried what I'd learned. Curiosity created access. That's what the house had wanted. That's what Leah had been waiting for. someone to look, to open the door, to meet the eyes of whatever was in the water. Attention could act like an invitation. Eye contact could be permission. I stopped looking into dark water at night. I stopped checking windows when I felt watched. And when I got back to my apartment 3 hours later with $400 cash in my pocket and my phone at 62% battery, I didn't talk about the house or the cistern or the wet shapes that had climbed the stairs looking for my face. I just paid my rent. That was it.